Hey Acceptance Squad, this is Alex from Alex's Autism Acceptance channel. I got a very important video for you all today. This is the reality that an autistic child could potentially get arrested, and this is what parents need to know. Let's talk about that. Given the serious nature of this topic, we're just going to jump right into this. This is by Carol Weinman. She is a defense attorney and very skilled in the knowledge of autism, and she is regularly posts articles about the criminal justice system and autism. So she is a very good resource. I would highly recommend checking her out. This was posted less than 2 years ago, so it is pretty reliable to this day. What better time to initiate a conversation about encounters with the criminal justice system than during Autism Awareness Month? As parents, we are all too familiar with the child who is bullied or victimized. Certainly. But parents are surprised to learn that their child is at an increased risk of being detained in the back of a police car or seated in a courtroom at the defendant's table. So there is a risk of both being the victim and being the perpetrator. So, why are we seeing this rise in criminal offenders with autism? For one, what may appear to be an increase may simply be attributed to an improvement in identifying them. Interesting. Secondly, police officers do not recognize the telltale signs of autism and innocently make characteristic behaviors as suspicious activity. And this is something from my own personal experience. I will probably talk about that later. And lastly, these so-called offenders do not understand that what they are doing may be wrong, let alone criminal. And I do believe this does depend on the type of severity, but overall, I'd say that is a true statement. As an attorney defending the rights of those with autism, how did this happen? Is the question I most often hear in my initial meeting with parents facing their child's arrest. These parents never envisioned the possibility that their child could be arrested, and certainly fear not, prosecuted, or even imprisoned. And the only true common denominator among these offenders is that they have autism. I think that's an important point because given the wide range of the spectrum of this, there are many factors that need to be involved. So, how did this happen? What led up to this moment? And what does every parent need to know in hopes of preventing such a catastrophic event? The early years. We know, as parents, the exasperation of dealing with a toddler who is in the throes of a tantrum or meltdown. We may see hands flailing or toys thrown. As our child with special needs gets older, we still may excuse what we've come to know as meltdowns because our child just can't help it. But the picture changes when those all too demanding behaviors continue into teen and adult years. Then, meltdowns can be deemed dangerous or threatening. That's why we must be proactive about offering our children skills and tools to avert triggers and manage meltdowns. So essentially, give your child the proper resources, and that can certainly lower the risk of something like this. In my years of representing criminal defendants with autism, I have found the most common offenses to be harassment, stalking, sexual assault, and child pornography. I think this is understandable. I talked about this in an earlier video with the fact that autistic individuals struggle with relationships, so they look for inappropriate ways to satisfy what is natural desires. Oftentimes, such behavior first raises its ugly head when children are tweens or teens. The reasons these crimes top the list include overactive curiosity, lack of empathy, theory of mind, and dysregulation, all typical of children with autism. So there is certainly a common denominator regarding that. Below are easy tips to implement early on. Monitor your child's computer access by Monitor your child's computer access. You must also encourage your child to ask questions by providing a safe, non-judgmental home environment. I think the home environment is one of the most essential things that determines an autistic person's functionality in the adult world, personally. You also have to find ways to stay connected with your child regularly. Limit computer time other than schoolwork to 1 or 2 hours a day. And I would suggest close supervision regarding that when they are doing schoolwork. A legal perspective. To better understand how your child could land in a courtroom or a prison, you need to know how the legal process approaches autism. Spoiler alert, it's not good. When the increased encounters between law enforcement of those in autism, police officers, attorneys, prosecutors, and judges are confronting uncharted territory. The majority do not understand autism, and the criminal justice system has not yet established laws addressing autism. And they are way behind on that. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. They are behind on that. Some state courts may have programs designed to divert and treat offenders with mental illness, but because autism is a neurological and developmental disorder, it does not qualify as a mental illness, which makes sense. That's why defending those with autism is a novel challenge that requires an intimate understanding and insight into how those with autism act and think. Unfortunately, too many people are not willing to do the research for that, so that often results in confusion. One of my most rewarding cases involved a 21-year-old male arrested for stalking. It all started when he was sitting behind the wheel of his parked car for hours outside the victim's home, binoculars in hand and food on the passenger seat. A concerned neighbor called the police, which is normal. The police arrived, ordered the driver out of the car, and proceeded to arrest him. When I asked my client if he understood why what he did was wrong or illegal, appearing obviously puzzled, he answered, no. As the trial day got closer, I approached the prosecutor to plead my uniqueness in the case. After all, my client's future hung in the balance, and when you're in your early 20s, you got your whole life ahead of you, and it's a big point in your life, so you cannot afford to go through the criminal justice system. I told her it is what it looks like. In disbelief, she responded, "Are you kidding? There were binoculars and food in the car." I passionately persisted in my attempt to make her understand. She resisted at first, but I was able to bring her round to my way of thinking. The case never saw the inside of a courtroom, and my client avoided a criminal conviction. Not all criminal defendants with autism are so fortunate. That's an important point. One of the most common things a parent says is, "My child didn't do it on purpose," and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Most of the defendants with autism for whom I advocate did not intend to commit a crime nor harm another person. Rather, the criminal acts are a reaction to a given situation. They acted in the only way they knew to protect themselves from a perceived threat. And that is so important to mention, and I really hope the courts get this down one day. To better understand this, let's look at the following scenarios where a child might be charged with assaulting another person. You receive an alarming call from your son's school. This is scenario 1. The police are there to arrest your son for striking a teacher. You later discover that your son was reacting to something the teacher said. You and your son are at the supermarket for scenario 2. You proceed down an aisle with your son close behind. Suddenly, you hear a scream. You quickly turn to see a stranger face down on the floor and the son nearby. A store employee calls the police who arrest your son for assault. Later, you learn your child believed the stranger was staring at him. Number 3. Your 20-year-old son is attracted to a girl he sees walking down the street. Being naive and possessing the emotional maturity of a much younger child, which often happens with autism, he approaches her and inappropriately touches her buttocks. So, where do we go from here? The most effective weapon available to combat future arrest and imprisonment of those with autism is education and understanding, which is so far behind schedule, and I'm very irritated about that. We must enlighten those with legal decision-making power, which is why I have been in contact before with several judicial members. Below are measures recommended to reduce arrests, as they should. it is not going to help somebody with autism if they get arrested. I don't think that is true for a single case. Number 1, train police officers, prosecutors, lawyers, and judges to recognize signs of autism. Number 2, train police officers how to interact with those on the autism spectrum, as those are the most common individuals that interact with people with autism. Number 3, educate lawyers, prosecutors, and judges about behaviors and mental deficits characteristics of those with autism. Train school employees how to interact with students on the spectrum, such as counselors and principals. Train parents to recognize red flags. Teach your children how to regulate their emotions. And instruct your children on appropriate behaviors and what is deemed a crime. I think those are all very important. It's a little bit of responsibility on the judicial system's part, but it's also responsibility for the parents. I do hope I make that clear from the video. The recommendations offered here do not guarantee that you will never get that dreaded call that your child has threatened someone or been arrested. However, they will hopefully help you answer the question, how did this happen? Providing your child with necessary skills and raising the awareness of how children with autism behave and perceive are a good place to start. So, like I said, I think it's a bit of a balancing act with responsibility in order to make sure children with autism do not go through that very traumatizing process. Alright guys, I think that's going to do it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. This was absolutely a more serious video, but it 100% needs to be addressed due to the rising rates in autism arrests. I mean, this was posted almost 2 years ago, and it has gotten even worse since then, and I think it will continue to get worse unless this information is readily available. So if you learned something, please share this video that with any parent with autism that you know. I think this is going to be very important for them to see. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like, be sure to subscribe. See you guys on Monday.